Hello everyone, I hope everyone is doing well. In this video I will show you how the Offline24 mode in the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System works. The information in this video is gathered by me from the manuals published by the Polish Ministry of Finance. As I understand, they present information on how, from Polish Ministry of Finance's point of view, the Offline24 mode should work, what are their expectations as to issuing invoices in this mode. Unfortunately, as of today, which is in March 2026, not everything, as I will show you, not everything is 100% clear when it comes to working with the Offline24 mode. And I hope that at the later stage these doubts will be somehow solved by the Polish Ministry of Finance. Okay, so without further ado, if this is something for you, then let's get to it. First of all, in order to recapitulate, please remember that within the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, we have in total 5 different modes of issuing invoices in the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. We have the online mode, which was described by me in earlier video. Then we have the Offline24 mode, offline unavailability mode, emergency mode, and total failure mode. And in this video we are focusing on the Offline24 mode. First of all, the Offline24 mode was introduced in order to ensure that also in the cases where there is a bad internet connection, or there is even a lack of an internet connection, the sales transaction that should be documented with an invoice can still be processed. Nevertheless, the Offline24 mode should not be understood insofar as the taxable person is allowed to use this mode only if certain circumstances appear. For example, like bad internet connection or lack of internet connection. The Offline24 mode can be used parallelly to the online mode when the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System is available. And therefore, the given taxable person does not have to strictly always issue invoices in the online mode. This taxable person can, as an alternative, while the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System is working and available, choose to issue a given invoice via the Offline24 mode. Consequently, there are no restrictions, conditions as to when the Offline24 mode can be used. It is being used alternatively to the online mode, and the Offline24 mode is automatically triggered when the invoice is issued at a date earlier than the date at which it is actually sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. So when you issue an invoice and you put in the P1 field on the invoice prepared in the XML file a given date, and at the same day this invoice is being sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, you are in the online mode. You have issued an invoice via the online mode. However, if you put in the P1 field a date of issue which is at the given day, but the invoice is being sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System at the date which is later than the date indicated in the P1 field, you are automatically switched to the Offline24 mode. Meaning, according to in view of the Polish VAT provision, this invoice was not issued in the online mode. It was issued using the Offline24 mode. What is also important is that, according to the Polish VAT provisions, while using the Offline24 mode, the taxable person has only 1 working day after the day of issuance indicated in the P1 field to send the invoice to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. So only 1 working day. If the invoice is sent later than 1 working day after the date of issuance indicated in the P1 field, then such invoice is deemed to be sent and received by the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System without meeting the statutory deadline for sending such invoice. However, in cases where the invoice was sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System while the mentioned deadline of 1 working day was met, or also in cases where this deadline of 1 working day was not met, it was sent later, still such invoice issued within the Offline24 mode will be deemed as issued at the date indicated in the P1 field, date of issue field by the taxable person. And similarly, as in case of an invoice issued in the online mode, also an invoice issued in Offline24 mode has to conform to the logical structure of the invoice, so-called FA3 structure, which is a structured standardized XML file. As a consequence of introducing the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, when it comes to the information that have to be indicated on the invoice, one additional field was introduced with the changes, namely the unique number of the invoice generated automatically and assigned to this invoice by the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. When it comes to all other information, they remain the same as before the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System was introduced. As mentioned within the Offline24 mode, the issue date will be equal to the date indicated by the taxpayer on the invoice in the P1 field, in the issue date field. And therefore, in the first step, while issuing invoices in the Offline24 mode, first the taxpayer sets the P1 field. He indicates the date of issue on the invoice that is then later sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. In second step, once the invoice is prepared within the Offline24 mode, it doesn't have to be immediately sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. To give you an example, in case of an online mode, we have a situation where the taxable person indicates in the P1 field, for example, the 30th of April 2026. In case of online mode, this taxable person sends this invoice at the same date, namely on the 30th of April 2026. We furthermore also assume that the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System has assigned a number to this invoice also on the 30th of April 2026. And consequently, the date of issue after processing in Polish National Electronic Invoicing System is the 30th of April 2026. Because the date of issue indicated in the P1 field is equal to the date of sending the invoice to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, which is equal to 30th of April 2026. This is online mode. Another example of online mode is when the date of issue indicated in the P1 field is 30th of April 2026. The invoice is, according to the online mode, sent at the same date by the taxable person, namely on the 30th of April 2026. But in this example, we assume that, for example, due to the fact that the invoice was sent at 11:55 p.m., 5 minutes before the midnight, the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System assigned the unique number to this invoice first on 1st of May 2026. Consequently, within the online mode, still the date of issue of this invoice after processing in Polish National Electronic Invoicing System is still the 30th of April 2026 because, again, as in the previous example, the date of issue indicated in the P1 field is equal to the date of sending the invoice to Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, which is equal to 30th of April 2026. On the other hand, if we have a situation where, and this is the Offline24 mode, if we have the situation that the date of issue indicated in P1 field by the taxable person is 30th of April 2026, but the date at which this invoice was sent by this taxable person to Polish National Electronic Invoicing System is 1st of May 2026, and consequently 1st of May 2026 the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System has assigned a number to this invoice, because the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System couldn't even do it earlier, since the invoice was sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System on 1st of May 2026. And consequently, according to the rules of the Offline24 mode, the date of issue of this invoice, after it is being processed, it was processed by the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, is the 30th of April 2026 as the date that is indicated by the taxable person in the P1 field of the invoice. Similarly, in case the invoice would be sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System instead on 1st of May 2026, on 15th of May 2026, and as a result of that, the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System would assign a number to this invoice also first on 15th of May 2026, then within the Offline24 mode, this invoice would still be treated as issued on the 30th of April 2026, which is equal to the date of issue indicated in the P1 field. However, in such case, since the invoice was sent first on 15th of May 2026 and the date of issue indicated by the taxable person is 30th of April 2026, the statutory deadline of 1 working day for sending the invoice to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System was not met. According to the manuals of the Polish Ministry of Finance, during the whole year 2026, such situations will not be penalized. However, starting with 1st of January 2027, Polish tax authorities may draw penal fiscal consequences out of such situations, where, as in the Offline24 mode, the invoice was not sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System within 1 working day after the date of issuance indicated in the P1 field. When it comes to potential deadlines that have to be met, that are involved while issuing an invoice via the Offline24 mode, then of course we have this mentioned 1 working day. The invoice has to be sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System within 1 working day after the date of issuance indicated in the P1 field by the taxable person. But on the other hand, please also notice that still the general statutory deadlines for issuing an invoice are applicable. According to the general rule, the invoice has to be issued until the 15th day of the month following the month in which the delivery of goods or supply of services or receipt of advance payment took place. Unless, of course, you are selling goods or services for which a special deadline of invoice issuance is defined, then of course you have to keep onto this special deadline defined in the Polish VAT provisions. Important is also to remember that while issuing the invoices within the Offline24 mode, as the date of issuance of the invoice, the date indicated in the P1 field will be treated. So consequently, if you have, for example, delivered goods or provided a service on 15th of May 2026, then, and assuming that this delivery of goods and supply of services are subject to those general deadlines for invoice issuance, then in such case you have time to issue an invoice until 15th of June 2026. Yeah? You've delivered the good or provided the service on the 15th of May 2026, then you have time to issue the invoice until 15th of June 2026. And if the invoice documenting this supply would be issued within the Offline24 mode, this deadline will be treated as met if you issue an invoice indicating the date of issuance on the 15th of June 2026 and send it at the latest on 16th of June to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. Despite the fact that the invoice was sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System first on 16th of June 2026, due to the fact that within the Offline24 mode we treat an invoice as issued on the day indicated by the taxable person in the P1 field, such invoice with the P1 field where the 15th of June 2026 is indicated will be treated as an invoice issued within the deadline of the 15th day of the month following the month in which the goods were delivered or service provided. Additionally, when it comes to the moment at which the invoice is received by the buyer, we have to divide the answer on that question depending on who the buyer is. If the buyer is a domestic taxable person which is identified with a Polish tax identification number, the NIP number, then according to what stands currently in the Polish VAT Act, this buyer receives this invoice through Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. So first, when the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System assigns a number to an invoice issued via the Offline24 mode, then this invoice is deemed as being received by the buyer. But of course, we have to remember that the moment at which the invoice is received by the buyer is currently, from the buyer's perspective, very important in terms of the right of input VAT deduction. As it is currently stated in the wording of the Polish VAT provisions, the buyer can first deduct input VAT resulting from a purchase of goods, first in the VAT declaration for the month in which this buyer received the invoice. And in this case, the question arises, what if the buyer receives the invoice through the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System significantly later than the mentioned one working day after the date of invoice issuance indicated in the P1 field? Or what if the buyer never even receives this invoice through the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System because, for example, the seller never sent the invoice to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System? What would follow from such wording of the Polish VAT Act is that if the invoice was never even sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, then at the side of the buyer, the right to deduct input VAT never arises. By the time of this recording, which is in March 2026, we have on one hand information in the manuals of the Polish Ministry of Finance that indeed in such cases, although the buyer never received the invoice through the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, meaning the buyer logged in onto his account in the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System and never saw this invoice there, still from the Polish Ministry of Finance's point of view, presented in the manual, the buyer does not have the right to deduct input VAT because he never received the invoice. On the other hand, however, there are sections in the same manuals which indicate that the buyer, although never received the invoice through the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, will indeed be treated as having received the invoice from the seller at the date at which he has received from the seller the visualization of this invoice before it was sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. So the consequence of that standpoint would be that if the seller issues an invoice via the Offline24 mode, gives the visualization of this invoice as a PDF file to the buyer has the right to deduct input VAT based on the received visualization of the invoice in PDF file in the VAT declaration for the month in which this visualization was received. Additionally, I've seen also the binding ruling issued by the Polish Ministry of Finance confirming that based on the visualization in PDF file of an invoice which was not yet sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, the right to deduct input VAT arises at the side of the buyer. So hopefully this situation and these doubts will be solved more in detail in the near future. However, on top of that, we also have to remember that in February 2026, the European Court of Justice presented a standpoint in one of its judgments that the Polish VAT regulations that are determining the right to deduct input VAT based on an invoice received are not in line with the EU law. So we shall see how this judgment will influence the right to deduct input VAT, also in cases of an invoice issued via the Offline24 mode. And of course, in case of other buyers which are not domestic taxable persons defined with the Polish tax identification number. These in particular will be, for example, consumers or clients located outside of Poland, in other EU member states, in other countries which are not member states of the European Union. In such case, this invoice will be handed over to such customers as a visualization in PDF. And for these buyers, the date of receipt is the actual date of delivery of this invoice to the buyer. On an invoice issued within the Offline24 mode, 2 QR codes have to be indicated if this is a visualization of such invoice before it was sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System. One of those codes will enable the buyer to verify the invoice as such, and the other QR code is a so-called certificate code, and this code will enable the buyer to verify the person of the issuer. However, after the invoice was sent to the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, was processed by the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, and as a result of that, the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System assigned a unique number to this invoice issued via the Offline24 mode. After this number was assigned by the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, if this invoice would be then, after this moment, shared with some client outside of the Polish National Electronic Invoicing System, then instead of 2 QR codes, this invoice will indicate only 1 QR code, which is a QR code that will enable the buyer to verify the invoice detail. Okay, everyone, I hope this was helpful for you. Thank you very much for watching. Have a great day and see you next time. Bye.